For Su Nanqing, life was a nightmare that began with a carefully engineered encounter. That incident left her pregnant before marriage, utterly alone and surrounded by the vicious gossip of the world. People cursed her as fat and ugly, a disgrace unworthy of the Gu family's prestigious engagement. Yet, even in despair, she clung to one sliver of hope and promised the children in her womb that no matter what happened, she would love them. Years later, that promise had become her adorable daughter, Huo Junyao, who depended on her with all the love in her heart. But her past still hung over her like a shadow, especially after she was reunited with a powerful man named Huo Junyao, setting off a chain of enormous misunderstandings. He coldly warned her to stay away from his son, leaving her completely baffled. The encounter struck her like a hammer blow, reminding her of a life she had once been forced to abandon, a life full of betrayal and pain. Her own younger sister had stolen the man she liked and everything she had, and when she was at her weakest, having just given birth, her father cruelly tore one of the twins from her arms, ignoring her desperate pleas. Fortunately, her loving aunt saved her from the brink of death. She left for a foreign country and swore that one day she would return and overturn everything. Now 5 years had passed, and she had been completely transformed. Su Nanqing had become a master of disguise, calm and composed like a queen. Huo Junyao, meanwhile, was a cold and aloof president high above everyone else. Her daughter Huo Junyao was clever and outgoing, and neither of them knew that the long-lost son, Huo Junyao, was a calm genius who doted especially on his little sister. From afar, this family of four was moving inevitably toward a collision of fate. This powerful pair, standing at opposite ends, was about to be drawn into a dramatic tug-of-war. The moment Su Nanqing stepped off the plane and returned to her homeland, her daughter innocently asked whether they had come back to find Daddy. Su Nanqing's heart was as cold as ice. Expressionless, she told the little girl that she had no father. But her daughter was far smarter than children her age and immediately guessed that they had actually come back to find her brother. Meanwhile, her former fiancé, Gu Anshuan, was waiting impatiently at the airport, ready to break off the engagement with her. He recalled the woman in his memory as nothing more than a damned fat girl, and even sneered to himself that she must be even uglier now. But when he saw Su Nanqing walking toward him, he was completely stunned by her astonishing beauty. Her daughter asked if he was there to pick them up, but he sneered, threw the sign with Su Nanqing's name on it to the ground, and flatly denied having anything to do with her. A cold smile curled at Su Nanqing's lips. Some people really never changed. Memories from 5 years ago instantly surged into her mind. Back then, she had stood beneath the judgmental gaze of everyone. Because she was carrying another man's child, she had been mocked endlessly. Gu Anshuan's face had been full of disgust as he angrily berated the fact that he still had to clean up her mess. She had been locked in a storage room, isolated, helpless, and full of fear. And after enduring a painful delivery, her father had brutally snatched her child from her arms and warned her not to move or she would die. After being saved by her aunt, her resolve only grew stronger. She had returned this time for 2 reasons: to officially break off the engagement, and more importantly, to find the child who had been stolen from her. Her past immediately came knocking when her father's call came through. He ordered her to come back at once and stop interfering in her sister's relationship with Gu Anshuan. Back at the airport, Gu Anshuan tried to strike up a conversation with her, only for her daughter to solemnly call him the blind uncle, while Su Nanqing simply took the child by the hand and left. Gu Anshuan cursed his bad luck, even thinking that if his fat fiancée were half as pretty as the woman before him, it would have been enough. Little Huo Junyao, however, muttered indignantly under her breath that her mommy wasn't fat at all. Later, Su Nanqing arrived at the birthday banquet of her half-sister, Su Eniying. She slipped inside without making a sound. Her mind was full of memories of her sister's betrayal all those years ago, so she found a seat and sat down, utterly uninterested in the party. That was until she heard a commotion. Her cousin Bai Lingxian was being bullied by Su Eniying and her friends, all because Bai Lingxian had said that the damn fat girl Su Nanqing actually had pretty features. With malicious delight, Su Eniying proposed a bet. She pulled out an unbearably ugly old photo of Su Nanqing and declared that if Bai Lingxian could prove Su Nanqing was good-looking, she would eat the photo. Otherwise, Bai Lingxian would be the one to eat it. Su Eniying smirked smugly, certain she would win. All she wanted was to watch this so-called friend suffer for speaking up for the sister she hated most. Just as the hangers-on were about to force the photo into Bai Lingxuan's mouth, a new voice cut through the crowd. Everyone turned and saw Su Nanqing herself. Dressed in white, she was stunning beyond words. Moving as fast as lightning, she snatched the photo from Su Anying's hand. Then she shoved it straight into her sister's shocked, gaping mouth. Su Anying choked and coughed violently as Su Nanqing looked down at her, cold fire blazing in her eyes. In an icy voice, she declared that a bet was a bet, and the loser had to accept the result. The room instantly erupted. Someone backed into a corner and warned her not to offend young Master Gu's fiancé and the powerful Gu family. But before the situation could escalate, a steady hand reached out. A silver-haired beauty asked if she was all right. Everyone gasped and finally recognized her. It was actually Su Nanqing, the once overweight and forgotten daughter of the Su family, now unbelievably beautiful. Meanwhile, her sister Su Anying was nearly driven mad with jealousy. She was convinced that Su Nanqing's transformation had to be the result of cosmetic surgery, and that she had deliberately come to humiliate her at her own birthday banquet. Inwardly, she swore this would not be the end of it. Her father, Su Hongrui, and stepmother, Song Lai, were equally stunned speechless. Especially her father. His first thought was how to use her beauty now to secure a profitable marriage alliance. Anying, a master at manipulating hearts, immediately burst into tears and threw herself into her father's arms, loudly accusing Nanqing of getting pregnant before marriage and claiming that this was the real reason young Master Gu wanted to break off the engagement. Pointing at Nanqing, she repeatedly called her the disgrace of the family. Humiliated in public, her father flew into a rage and raised his hand high, intending to strike her on the spot. But her stepmother stopped him at once, reminding him that there were guests present. He then ordered Nanqing to go upstairs with them. Facing this so-called family as they all turned and walked away together, Nanqing merely watched them coldly, distant and indifferent. Once inside a private room, she felt her head grow heavy and drowsiness wash over her, while her father began making demands. He told her that the engagement with the Gu family was officially over, but the person taking her place would be her younger sister. And as a dowry and birthday gift, Nanqing had to sign over the company her mother had left behind. Her sister smugly added that since Nanqing had disgraced the family, handing over the company was only proper compensation. The transfer contract was pushed across the table, but fire rekindled in Nanqing's eyes. She reminded them that for 5 whole years, she had been the one trying to dissolve the engagement while they had clung desperately to the Gu family, and now they were shamelessly placing all the blame for its end on her. In a voice full of resolve, she declared that everything in that house had originally belonged to her mother, and she would never hand over the only 2 companies she had left. She firmly said no, ignored their fury, and stated only that she was tired and needed to go home to her precious Xiao. She was happy to see the engagement end, but there was no way she would provide any dowry. Her sister sneered viciously, mocking that no matter how beautiful she became, Guan Chuan would never marry a ruined woman dragging around a little bastard. That single phrase shattered the last of Nanqing's restraint. She spun around and raised her hand. A sharp slap landed heavily across her sister's face. Terrifying rage burned in her eyes as she warned her that Gu Xiao was not a bastard, and if she dared to spew such nonsense again, she would not show mercy a second time. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving the stunned family behind. As she stepped out of that suffocating villa, back at home, she yawned tiredly and was greeted by the adorable little Gu Xiao. She had specially run out because she wanted to eat moose cake. She pulled him in her arms, kissed his cheek, and promised that she would get him cake after taking one phone call. The moment she answered, the child looked at her worriedly and reminded her to be careful. The news from the other end confirmed his concern. The caller reported that Huo Junyao, the one in power from the foremost family in China, was gathering her personal information, and now that she had returned to the country, she could no longer stay hidden. Overhearing everything, little Gu Xiao's expression immediately turned serious, and she quietly slipped over to a laptop. At the same time, Huo Junyao also received news that the world-renowned surgeon Anthea had returned to the country, and they had already obtained her photograph. But his attention was quickly interrupted by his son Huo Xiao, who was demanding moose cake. Huo Junyao, a man with overwhelming presence and astonishing status, let out a faint sigh and, with a trace of helplessness, told the child to go change first. Afterward, he instructed his assistant to check the security footage for their floor. At that very same moment, Nanqing was on the phone with a friend who kept going on and on about how handsome Huo Junyao was, but Nanqing was unimpressed. After hanging up, she went to get the cake she had promised her son. She opened the door and walked straight into a hard chest. Looking up, she found Huo Junyao himself, carrying his son. Looking down at her with a cold expression, he told Miss Su to stay away from his son, then added mercilessly that she was not his type at all. With that, he turned and left, leaving Su Nanqing standing alone in the hallway, angry and bewildered, thinking the man was absolutely insane. Meanwhile, back at the Su family villa, Su Enning tearfully complained to her fiancé, Anshuan, claiming that her sister had deliberately come to ram into her, perfectly playing the victim. She successfully provoked Anshuan into a rage. He shouted that he wanted to know where that damn fat woman was so he could settle accounts with her in person. Enning panicked at once. She could not let him see the now breathtakingly beautiful Nanqing. So she hurriedly lied, saying Nanqing was only throwing a tantrum because she had a hand over the company. In any case, Anshuan had no mind to think deeply about it, because his investigator called to say they had already found the hotel where the mysterious beauty from the banquet was staying. His mind was full of that newly appeared woman, and he even began fantasizing about marrying her instead. Later, Nanqing was asleep when a phone call from her sister woke her up. The moment the line connected, the woman started shouting, demanding to know why she was not answering the phone and pressuring her to make a decision about the company immediately. Then Enning switched tactics and hypocritically offered a pitiful compromise price, 500,000 yuan, while loftily asking whether Nanqing had ever even seen that much money in her life. Nanqing's eyes snapped open, icy cold. The offer was an insult. She knew perfectly well that her mother's company earned 5 million yuan in annual profit. There was no way she would sell her mother's legacy cheaply to these greedy people who were not even truly related to her by blood. The woman on the other end kept rattling on, demanding to know why Su Nanqing was not speaking, then continued lecturing her in a superior tone. She smugly informed Su Nanqing that her pharmaceutical company was already on the verge of bankruptcy, and that a useless nobody like her, uneducated and incapable, could never possibly understand business. She boasted that she was a top medical student preparing to apply for the graduate program of the legendary Professor Anthea. She spoke the mysterious genius surgeon's name with deliberate grandeur. But lying in bed, Su Nanqing remained utterly unmoved, with only one thought in her head. This woman was unbearably noisy. The woman on the phone flew into a complete rage, accusing Su Nanqing of playing dumb because she did not really want to break off the engagement. Nanqing let out a bored sigh and hung up directly. The sudden silence was soothing, but unfortunately her drowsiness had been thoroughly ruined. She sat up in bed in an elegant nightgown, then placed another call. Her voice was cold and decisive as she ordered someone named Solo to pull up all the information on Minjia Pharmaceuticals. On the other end, the world's #1 hacker complained pitifully that even if he owed her his life, that did not mean she could order him around like a subordinate. Su Nanqing remained unmoved and merely asked coldly how much exactly his life was worth. He instantly caved and promised to deliver the information within 5 minutes. Just then, her thoughts were interrupted by a cheer from her daughter, Gu Ziao. She said she had just gotten a quad kill in her game. She changed into a stunning outfit, while Gu Ziao had already run over at top speed to greet Mommy. She bent down and kissed him, told the maid that she had to go out for a while, and gently reminded her son not to spend all day playing games. At that moment, her phone vibrated with a new message from Solo. The information had already been sent over. He had also included a bit of gossip, saying that Mr. Huo from the Foremost family was offering several million to find out whether the mysterious Anthea was male or female, and even eagerly asked whether she wanted him to send a photo of this handsome big shot as well. But when the photo arrived, Su Nanqing's expression changed sharply. It was actually him. A strange flicker of recognition passed over her face, then a cold smile curved her lips as she told Solo to pass a message to the presidential suite next door. Huo Junyao's assistant, Zhou Lang, reported that Solo had relayed a message from the mysterious Doctor Anthea. Huo Junyao grew interested and asked what it was. Zhou Lang nervously cleared his throat and explained that Doctor Anthea wanted to know whether Mr. Huo was in such a hurry to find her because his brain needed surgery. A dark aura instantly rose around Huo Junyao, anger churning within him. He curled his lips dangerously and demanded to see the photo of the woman who had dared to insult him. He wanted to see exactly what this infuriating person looked like. Later, soon Nanqing reminded her daughter Guo to watch out for their new neighbor, saying that someone very troublesome had moved in next door and that she should stay obediently inside and not go out. Gu Xiao asked whether the person was a monster, so she mischievously described him as a pretty monster with a mole near the corner of his eye, though he did not seem very bright. Gu Xiao nodded calmly and said she never played with idiots. After waving goodbye, Su Nanqing left the suite with her thoughts in turmoil. She knew Huo Junyao had been tracking down Anthea's true identity, and living so close to him was a dangerous coincidence. But the instant she opened the door, she froze. She had run straight into Huo Junyao himself. Panic flashed through her heart as she realized he had definitely overheard everything she had just said to her son, so she could only apologize in an extremely perfunctory tone, saying she had merely been joking with the child. The two entered the elevator together, the entire ride tense and silent. She could clearly feel the terrifying killing intent radiating from him, which only confirmed that the man was every bit as troublesome as she had thought. Huo Junyao, however, found himself inexplicably interested in her. He noticed her fair skin and how skilled she was at insulting people. Even without using a single curse word, she could leave someone choking with anger. A faint sense of familiarity stirred in his heart. When the two of them stepped into the hotel lobby, a blonde young master had already been waiting there and finally spotted the woman he had been searching for. Su Nanqing's face was full of impatience. The engagement had already been dissolved, so why was this man still haunting her? Yet he stepped in front of her with a bouquet of flowers and a charming smile. Then she remembered that he had appeared during her delivery, and she immediately realized she could use this chance to pry the whereabouts of her other child out of the Su family. Just then, Sushi himself appeared holding a bouquet as well, calling her miss and suggesting they have coffee together to celebrate this fated encounter. As they walked and talked, he tentatively asked about the little girl by her side, saying she looked far too young to be a mother. Up on the balcony, Huo Junyao's subordinate was fuming with anger, complaining that this woman was not only stringing along two men, but had also lied by claiming the girl was her younger sister. Huo Junyao's expression darkened further. He uttered only one word, ordering a full investigation into her entire background. In the cafe, Sushi insisted that he was not trash, then immediately began disgustingly insulting his former fiancée, calling her an illiterate, uneducated fat girl who had been forced on him, while claiming that the real victim had always been him. The more Nanqing listened, the more bored she became. She remembered her mother once saying that to survive, one had to hide one's talents, and she found the Su family's methods increasingly revolting. But when Sushi mentioned a rumor that his fiancée had given birth to a child 5 years ago, and that the child had later been discarded, her attention snapped into focus. She narrowed her eyes and demanded to know where the child had been discarded, but he immediately panicked and repeatedly denied it, saying it was only a rumor, then claimed that the woman had taken the child abroad. By then, Nanqing had already learned enough, so she rose to leave and coolly said she had merely been curious. When he tried to stop her, she asked him directly whether he intended to tell the truth or not. All he could do was stammer that his uncle had handled the matter and he knew nothing about it. She left without a backward glance, ignoring his request to stay in touch and bluntly saying it would not be convenient. After returning to the presidential suite, her daughter Gu Xiao was completely absorbed in a video game, ordering her teammate Little Dummy around and telling him to help her score a pentakill. The moment Nanqing stepped inside, Gu Xiao's face lit up instantly. She threw the game aside, rushed into her mother's arms, and happily cried that she was finally back and that she had missed her terribly. Nanqing smiled and decided to take her out for a meal as compensation. Gu Xiao excitedly announced that she wanted to wear a gray suit, making Nanqing unable to help wondering why her daughter always insisted on dressing like a boy. In the room next door, a little boy named Huo Junyao was playing the same game. The moment he suddenly realized who his teammate was, he was completely stunned. It was her. She had come back. He was on the phone with Gu Xiao, who was even laughing as she called him the little dummy next door. She asked whether he wanted to play together, but just as he was about to agree, the game abruptly ended because his teammate had quit. His uncle, Huo Junyao, snatched away his tablet and warned him that his tyrant of an older brother was on his way back. Completely ignored, Junyao still tried to brag about his gaming skills and his friendship with the #1 player on the server, Candy Sweetheart, but Huo Xiao only pointed at a gray suit and said he wanted to go eat at a buffet. Junyao agreed without thinking, only to realize in the very next second that he had misspoken. He immediately panicked and hurriedly said his brother would never allow such a thing, and taking him out would be crossing a red line. Huo Xiao's expression did not change. He only said lightly that as long as they did not get caught, it would be fine. He also told his uncle that if his older brother came back, he should call his watch. After saying that, he dashed toward the elevator. Huo Junyao collapsed to the floor in despair, watching this little troublemaker escape. But the next second, another elevator dinged open, revealing his terrifying older brother, and he instantly went cold all over. Huo Junyao strode in while loosening his tie and asked coldly where Huo Xiao was. Cornered, Huo Junyao muttered that he was in the buffet area. A dangerous chill immediately flashed through Huo Junyao's eyes. Downstairs, she was picking up food when a small hand suddenly tugged at her skirt. She looked down and saw Huo Xiao looking up at her. His eyes were red, and his voice trembled as he asked if she was his mommy. She was momentarily stunned and thought the child was just emotionally off today, so she picked him up and asked guiltily what he wanted to eat. Full of grievance, the little boy softly called her mommy, then asked with red-rimmed eyes why she had abandoned him all these years. In the distance, Huo Junyao watched his son happily tell this strange woman that she was prettier than any actress and that his father should marry her, making him wonder what exactly she had said to the child. She sat down with the boy and watched him eat an astonishing amount, thinking only that he was being unusually well-behaved tonight. Huo Xiao ate with great satisfaction because he knew punishment was waiting for him and only wanted to stretch out every second he could spend with mommy. After finishing the last piece of cake, he yawned. Seeing this, Huo Xiao felt a wave of guilt. He thought he had sided with Daddy and made Mommy, who was already exhausted, stay out so late, so he suggested going back and then left. She took her biological daughter by the hand, while Huo Xiao carried the cake back to their table, only to find that no one was there. Just then, his father's voice cut through the silence, announcing that his time was up. Huo Junyao picked up the startled boy in one swift motion, and the boy instinctively braced himself for a scolding. But to his shock, his father gently asked whether he had eaten enough. Such a rare change left him completely stunned. Late that night, Ning's door was suddenly knocked on. She opened the door and saw that it was Huo Junyao. Inwardly, he marveled at her beauty, but quickly decided that she was trying to seduce his older brother. He got straight to the point and arrogantly told her that this hotel belonged to the Huo family, then offered her $1 million to move out of the presidential suite. He shook the black card in his hand and even threatened that if she refused this friendly suggestion, he would call security upstairs. What Su Nanqing met was the lofty sneer of this young man. He questioned whether she looked like someone who lacked money and even threatened that if she refused the payment, he would have security throw her out. He accused her of trying to seduce his older brother, saying she had spent heavily just to stay next door, and publicly exposed her scandals, her broken engagement, and her premarital pregnancy. She narrowed her eyes impatiently. So living next door was a crime now? But he declared that only guests of noble status were worthy of staying beside his brother, and that person would appear very soon. Realizing that staying so close had already caused trouble, Su Nanqing felt there was no need to argue further. With a flip of her wrist, she showed her room card and simply agreed to change rooms, which made the young man extremely smug. He decided she was at least sensible enough to know what was good for her, confident that the presidential suite downstairs would be enough to keep her far from his brother. Half an hour later, that same young man, Huo Junyao, stood before his brother and reported that they had lost the person they were tracking. His brother was clearly a little impatient and told him that he was not blind. Eager for praise, Huo Junyao proudly announced that he had already persuaded the woman next door to move away and guaranteed that she would not cause any more trouble. But instead of praising him, his brother coldly cursed him for having something wrong with his head, leaving him utterly baffled. Meanwhile, a third person silently pondered why their pursuit of the hacker, codenamed Anthea, had failed and wondered whether there might be a traitor among them. At the same time, in her new room, Nanqing was on the phone. The caller was reporting to her that Mr. Hua had hired top hackers who had traced her information through her contact. Fortunately, her exact location was still secure. She casually reminded the other party to be more careful next time, yawned, tossed her phone aside, and finally prepared to sleep. Her son, Huo Junyao, quietly peeked in, saw that she was asleep, and gently closed the door. He jumped onto his bed and sent a message to his boss in the game, Little Chun, complaining that some big idiot had forced them to change rooms. Little Chun instantly exploded, swearing that whoever dared bully his boss's son, he would kill them. Ironically, this Little Chun was none other than Huo Junyao himself. As it happened, he was first killed in the game, and then his boss avenged him with a beautiful 4-kill streak. Thrilled, he hurriedly asked where his boss was staying. When he learned that they were both at First Hotel, his eyes widened in shock. He was just about to rush over when Huo Junyao suddenly logged off because Mommy had woken up, leaving Huo Junyao on the verge of collapse as he kept asking for the room number. Huo Junyao sweetly greeted Mommy, and the two shared a warm moment. After that, she ordered takeout and told him to go play by himself. Her phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from a stranger, saved as young Master Gu, asking her to meet at a bar to talk. Without a second thought, she deleted it. At the same time, this young Master Gu was at the bar preparing a grand confession and even instructed his people to call more spectators over. A woman named Su Manru watched him, deeply displeased by how distant he had been recently. But when she received his mass text saying there was a surprise at the bar, her mood instantly turned around. Then she overheard his subordinate quietly mention a proposal to his fiancée, and she was overjoyed, convinced it had all been prepared for her. In the lobby, she saw Nanqing picking up takeout and sneered in disdain, thinking there was no way she could afford to stay at a hotel like this. She confronted her to her face, asking whether she was trying to hook another rich man again, while Nanqing expressionlessly deleted yet another message from young Master Gu. Then she shot back that at least she still had a face pretty enough to live off a man, infuriating Su Manru. Immediately afterward, Su Manru revealed her trump card, saying that as long as she came to the bar at 8 that night, she would tell her where the child she had abandoned was. She turned and left, certain that her rival would come and witness with her own eyes the glorious proposal. A cold smile curled on Nanqing's lips. She wanted to see exactly what her dear little sister and her former fiancé were planning. A while later, in a lively bar, Su Manru's friends were gossiping about the engagement and putting all the blame for its delay on that damned fat woman. Just then, Nanqing appeared. Su Manru immediately accused her of coming to ruin the occasion and publicly humiliated her for getting pregnant before marriage. Then she pressed her again about where that child was, before leaning close with a vicious smile and telling Nanqing to sit obediently through the performance and offer her blessings, and only then would she tell her the truth. Su Manru smugly told Nanqing to sit down and watch this grand show, even pretending to ask for blessings for herself and Gu Junyao. But in Nanqing's eyes, this was nothing more than a ridiculous proposal far staged, specifically to humiliate her, a clown show she was more than willing to watch to the end. She sat down calmly and signaled that they could begin. Her composure only infuriated Nanqing, who wondered whether her sister had always been this arrogant. The onlookers whispered that young Master Gu must have spent a fortune this time, and that Nanqing was probably making a scene because she still could not forget him. Nanqing bent down and mocked Nanqing's past, bringing up how terribly fat she used to be and how she had followed Gu Junyao around all day long. She smugly declared that even if Nanqing had slimmed down now, it was already too late, because Gu Anxuan had long since fallen in love with her. The ridicule continued, lamenting only that such a pretty face had been paired with such a burden. Those words sent an icy chill through Su Nanqing's heart. She suddenly realized that Su Eniying's mother was very likely the person who had injected her with hormones back then and ruined her youth. A cold rage surged within her, and she recalled how, when she was only 5 years old, the fate of the two families had become entangled because of a marriage agreement. Just then, the lights dimmed, and Gu Anxuan walked onto the stage holding a guitar, instantly sending the whole room into an uproar. He lifted a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. Then he began to sing and play. Su Eniying gazed obsessively at her handsome man, while Su Nanqing felt only disgust, thinking that being tied to such a person for life would truly be a curse. After the song ended, Gu Anxuan announced that he had booked the entire venue just to confess to his special girl, someone who had seemed different from the very first moment he met her. Balloons burst, flower petals rained down across the stage, and Su Eniying proudly showed off to Su Nanqing, saying that even 10 of her combined would not equal one of her toes, and now Gu Anxuan was completely devoted to her. Holding roses, Gu Anxuan moved through the crowd. From the direction he was heading, it looked as though he was walking straight toward the excited Su Eniying, and her heartbeat quickened with every step. But in the next second, the plot took a sharp turn. He walked right past her, his gaze locked firmly on someone else. Su Eniying's world instantly collapsed, as she could only stare while he stopped in front of the person she had just humiliated. The one he offered the flowers to was not her, but the calm Missin. He asked whether he had the honor of becoming her friend. The whole room immediately erupted in confused murmurs, and Su Eniying was so shocked she could not speak. She simply could not accept that he would abandon his fiancée for the sake of fat girl he had only met twice. A faint mocking smile rose to Su Nanqing's lips as she quietly enjoyed the chaos before her. Su Eniying finally lost control completely and lunged forward, raising her hand and cursing her shamelessness. But Gu Anxuan grabbed her wrist and barked at her to stop making a scene. Furious, he scolded her and told her to learn from Miss and what elegance and dignity really meant. Su Eniying was completely dumbfounded and asked who exactly he was talking about. Su Nanqing let out a light laugh and coldly explained that it was just her English name. Then she delivered the final blow and revealed her real name, Su Nanqing. Gu Anxuan froze instantly, his face full of shock. Su Eniying flew into a rage and screamed that they had all been deceived, that Su Nanqing had come on purpose to take revenge on her. She lost all reason and ordered her men to beat this troublesome woman to death. Even as a group of thugs closed in, Su Nanqing remained seated steadily, a chilling smile rising on her face as she thought that so many people had come to die today, enough at least to let her stretch her muscles. In a lobby downstairs, the assistant of a powerfully imposing man noticed that a woman upstairs was about to be mobbed. Just as those men were preparing to attack Su Nanqing, an authoritative voice suddenly rang through the entire place, ordering them to stop. A man in a black suit walked in, radiating such overwhelming presence that the entire conflict came to an abrupt halt. In the magnificent corridor of First Hotel, a tense confrontation was unfolding as Huo Junyao's assistant reminded the troublemakers that fighting was strictly forbidden in the hotel. The sudden appearance of this group immediately suppressed the other side's arrogance. Their people were still guessing who this terrifyingly imposing man was and scoffing at the rules. But when that blonde man heard that the newcomer was the famous President Huo, bone-deep fear instantly swept through him. They recognized the name at once, Huo Junyao, a man who could crush them as easily as ants. So they all fled in panic, afraid he would hold them accountable for the disturbance. Just as Su Eniying, dressed in a red gown, turned to run, a cold hand suddenly seized her arm, freezing her on the spot. It was Su Nanqing. Her silver hair shimmered faintly, and her gaze clearly told her that this was far from over. Su Eniying panicked immediately, desperately telling Su Nanqing to let go and demanding to know whether she had gone mad, daring to defy President Huo's order for everyone to leave. A cruel smile appeared on Su Nanqing's lips as she looked at her mockingly, as if ridiculing the fact that she still did not dare fight back even now. With one powerful kick, she sent Su Eniying flying, her body rolling miserably across the polished floor. The remaining onlookers were all so shocked by this ferocious display of strength that they sucked in sharp breaths. Su Nanqing advanced step by step, grinding her high heel hard onto Su Inying's hand, then yanked her up by the hair and forced her to finish what she had not said earlier. Su Inying's friends screamed and begged President Huo to stop her, but Huo Junyao merely watched, a flicker of interest passing through his eyes as he privately acknowledged that her skills were indeed extraordinary. Instead, it was the assistant who could not help but loudly interrupt again, restating the hotel's no-fighting policy. Su Nanqing could not even be bothered to spare him a glance, and only replied coldly that she was alone, so it did not count as a group beating. That outrageously arrogant logic left the assistant speechless, while all her enemies were too frightened to move. Only one thought remained in Su Nanqing's mind. She merely wanted to know where her child was. Yet these disgusting idiots kept blocking her way again and again. Her grip tightened further as she threatened Su Inying that if she did not start talking immediately, she would beat her until she could never speak again. The threat worked. Su Inying broke down crying and said that the matter of that child had been handled by the child's biological father, and that she knew nothing else. She even swore on the face she cared about most, saying that if she was lying, her whole face could break out in pimples. The oath was so ridiculous that Su Nanqing instead knew she was telling the truth. Su Nanqing released the sobbing woman and turned to leave, but a trace of annoyance rose in her heart. She felt that by making a move, she might have caused Huo Junyao to lose face, and she was considering whether to explain. But the day's exhaustion suddenly swept over her, and she ended up letting out a huge yawn first. Huo Junyao's assistant stared in disbelief, feeling that this was simply naked provocation. But she only said calmly that only an idiot would provoke President Huo. Huo Junyao looked at her with interest, intrigued by the contrast between her decisive ruthlessness just now and her current lazy listlessness. Then, with a cold shout, he told the chattering assistant to shut up. Elsewhere, Huo Junyao's younger brother, Huo Junyao, was in a cafe, eagerly waiting for the appearance of his online gaming boss. Unexpectedly, a voice made him lower his head, and he saw a little boy standing in front of him, Huo Zhao, seriously declaring that he was that boss. Huo Junyao was utterly stunned, and only then realized that the professional-level gaming god he had been fighting alongside all this time was actually his own nephew. A chill instantly ran through him as he began imagining what would happen if that terrifying older brother found out he had secretly taken his son gaming. He quickly glanced at his phone, and his worst premonition immediately came true. It was already late, and his brother had very likely gone home. He scooped up the boy and raced home like a madman, only hoping that before the two of them were beaten to death, he could at least shove Huo Ziao back into doing his homework. When he arrived home, he happened to run into his brother entering the house. Inwardly, he thanked the heavens because Huo Ziao was already sitting there quietly reading. At the same time, Huo Ziao felt hurt because he had been forbidden for going to the top floor, and he could not help wondering whether Daddy already disliked him. So he decided to take the stairs, only to run straight into Su Nanqing, who had just returned. Happily, he hugged her leg, deciding to settle accounts with Daddy another day, and asked whether he could sleep with her tonight. The next day, Su Nanqing was awakened by a call from her father. The moment he spoke, he accused her of ruining her younger sister's proposal and even hitting someone. He ordered her to come home immediately and apologize, roaring that everything was her fault. Just as Su Nanqing was about to hang up, her father threw out another heavy blow. Her aunt had a brain tumor and was in the hospital. Her expression instantly turned cold, and she said she would go over at once. Meanwhile, in the chaotic Huo household, Huo Junyao had no chance to escape before his brother blocked him. In his panic, he blurted out that they needed to have a proper talk. Driven into a corner, he even recklessly guessed that maybe Huo Junyao simply did not like women at all. The force of that gossip was so astonishing that it completely stunned his brother, and even the assistant beside them was left speechless. 15 minutes later, the elevator doors slowly opened, and when Su Nanqing stepped out, she happened to hear two women whispering. They were coldly talking about the little young master's cruel punishment and self-righteously saying that he had autism, and that his usual taciturn behavior was nothing more than stubborn pretense. One of the women even laughed smugly and revealed that that they had not even given the child lunch, intending to see how long he could hold out without making a sound. A wave of unease immediately rose in Su Nanqing's heart. Though she told herself that this was, after all, President Huo's family matter and none of her business, her heart still sank for no reason. Just then, Mr. Huo himself arrived with a group of people. His assistant immediately stepped forward to stop her, sneering contemptuously that he had seen plenty of women like her before, women who merely wanted to use thanking the president as an excuse to get his contact information. Su Nanqing listened expressionlessly, then only cast him a cold glance, instantly feeling that she should not have meddled in the first place. She turned to leave, tossing behind her a remark for the assistant to pass on to President Huo. He should go see a neurologist. She said lightly that narcissism was also an illness and needed treatment. With that, she left wearing a satisfied smile. But her troubles were far from over. In the hospital room, her uncle slammed a contract down in front of her and forced her to sign over the company, while also demanding that she apologize to her younger sister. He viciously threatened that if she refused, she should not expect him to save her aunt. Her sickly aunt tried to push herself up, her voice weak as she urged her otherwise. The rest of the family also joined in pressuring her, saying that her aunt had a brain tumor, and the only doctor willing to risk the operation just happened to be a friend of her cousin's fiancé. And the price of this life-saving surgery was simple: Su Nanqing's company, along with an apology from her so humble it sank into the dust. Her aunt was utterly enraged by their shamelessness and shouted hoarsely at them to stop talking nonsense. Then, with tears in her eyes, she looked at Su Nanqing and confessed that her illness could not really be cured, and besides, the surgery itself had a 90% chance of failure. Su Nanqing set the medical records down heavily. She agreed not to sign and promised she would come back to visit soon. As she left, she clenched her fists, her thoughts churning. She knew that this surgery was nearly impossible for anyone to perform, except herself. Behind her, her uncle was still shouting nonstop, cursing her as an ungrateful ingrate who would not even spare a second glance for the woman who had raised her. At the same time, in the presidential suite, young Huo Junyao was being tormented by his tutors. The tutors berated him for not finishing his homework, even though those problems were clearly far beyond his grade level. Then they viciously sneered that his mother's genes must have lowered his intelligence. The boy obviously knew the answer, but because he had not written out the steps, he was slapped across the face and forced to stand as punishment. 2 hours later, the tutors discussed complaining to his father, saying he was naughty and troublesome. The only thing the little boy wanted was to talk with his mother and with the girl who had moved downstairs. He made up his mind and walked toward the stairs, only to see his own reflection coming toward him. At least, that was what he thought. It was not a mirror, but another child, his twin sister. Gu Xiao immediately cheered that she had finally found her older brother and threw her arms around the stunned Huo Xiao. Gu Xiao quickly explained that the bad grandpa had taken Huo Xiao away, but that she and Mom had come back to find him. She excitedly suggested they go find Mom together, then added one crucial detail: Mom definitely did not want Dad. The twins sat on the stairs, slowly piecing together their broken family. Only then did Gu Xiao introduce herself properly, and she also learned that her brother was called Huo Xiao. Together, they came up with a brilliant plan to make their parents fall in love again. The first step was to switch identities. Gu Xiao would pretend to be his brother and go see Dad, while Huo Xiao secretly longed to finally meet Mom. After returning to the hospital, Su Nanqing settled the arrangements for her aunt's surgery and had just breathed a sigh of relief. But when she neared the ward, she overheard her family's nauseating scheming. Her cousin broke down emotionally, screaming that her mother had always favored Su Nanqing, giving her more fabric and even extra money. The argument escalated until another cousin dropped to her knees with a thud, crying and begging Ning to save their mother. Their father immediately saw a new way to manipulate the situation and ordered his daughter to kneel outside Su Nanqing's hotel and publicly humiliate her, forcing her to sign the contract. Standing in the hallway, Su Nanqing's face darkened with contempt. The commotion also enraged her aunt, who loudly condemned her own brother's cruelty. That completely pushed her uncle by Huai past his limit. He roared at the whole pack of ungrateful relatives, telling them all to get out, then grabbed a basket of fruit like a weapon and denounced them for repaying his wife's kindness with such greed. Then, in a fit of rage, he smashed the fruit basket to the floor. So Nanqing stood motionless. Her uncle, however, furiously accused her of being cold-hearted, bellowed at her to get out, and then slammed the door in her face. Outside the door, her male cousin tried to comfort her, explaining that his father was only worried about her aunt and the company. But Nanqing remained indifferent and asked in return whether he truly had even the slightest bit of sympathy in his heart. She turned and left, ignoring the man's pleas. Just then, her phone lit up. Bai Ling Chuan had sent her a message saying that in a few days, someone would come perform the surgery for her aunt. In the distance, Mr. Huo and his assistant Zhou Lang were watching the scene. Zhou Lang remarked that the Su family was shameless to the extreme. But Mr. Huo thought Miss Su's cold and distant manner was rather interesting, so he quietly instructed Zhou Lang to investigate whether her aunt's illness could still be cured. Later, when Mr. Huo got out of the car and saw Su Nanqing waiting for him, he smugly sneered to himself, convinced that since he had given her a chance, she would surely beg pitifully for his help next. But Su Nanqing had something else on her mind. She was thinking about how his child was being bullied. Calmly, she called out to him. Not only did she not plead for her family, she instead asked about his son's private tutors. Mr. Huo froze, and his confident, cold smile instantly stiffened. She had actually advised him to pay more attention to his own son. As her unexpected words fell, a gloomy aura spread around him. Zhou Lang was completely baffled. Realizing that she had actually given up a perfect chance to save her dying aunt, he could not help cursing her as crazy and heartless, finally deciding that he should never have interfered in the first place. Meanwhile, in the presidential suite, Gu Ziao was sneaking around while disguised as her brother, only to be caught on the spot by a strict tutor. The tutor viciously scolded him for not finishing his homework, sneering that his stupidity must have been inherited from his mother, then changing tack and calling him a little bastard with no mother, just as she was about to teach him a lesson and had raised her ruler. Another child who looked exactly like him suddenly made a beeping sound with a device. This child, who had already switched identities with his brother, could not help marveling the moment he saw Mr. Huo arrive. Dad is so handsome, so cool. Inside the room, the tutor complained to Mr. Huo that young Master Huo Ziao was stubborn and naughty, refused to study, and was falling far behind. She also said that Huo Ziao was introverted and withdrawn, an idiot who did not even know how to tell on others, and suggested using special educational methods, implying that he had congenital autism. If he was not sent to a special school, she said, his future would surely be ruined. Overhearing all this, the boy thought the teacher was despicable beyond words and secretly swore that if Dad really agreed, he would run away from this tiger's den with his brother and mom. But Mr. Huo's expression darkened. He coldly declared that Huo Ziao had absolutely no problem, and if she could not teach him, someone else naturally could. He fired her on the spot. He ordered Zhuolong to settle her pay and made it clear that she was never to return. The tutor was stunned by the sudden decision and tried to defend her professional advice, but Mr. Huo directly added another 6 months' salary as compensation, shutting her up. As she was let out, the boy finally breathed a sigh of relief, glad that Dad had protected his brother, but still worried that Dad had been deceived by the teacher. Tugging at Mr. Huo's pant leg, he innocently asked whether he was really that little bastard with no mother. Those words struck Mr. Huo like a bolt from the blue. He immediately crouched down and, with a dark expression, asked Huo Ziao who had said such a thing to him. The boy directly pointed at the tutor who was about to leave. Then he instantly hid behind his father, tearfully begging the teacher not to hit him anymore, and saying that he knew he was wrong. The tutor froze in terror. This child, whom she had assumed could not speak up, had exposed her completely. Rage blazed in Mr. Huo's eyes as he ordered Zhou Lang to drag her out. Later, Zhou Lang reported the results of the investigation. Those tutors had all been sent by the second branch of the family, and they had accepted bribes to deliberately turn Huo Ziao into a problem child, so that their own children could take over the company in the future. Knowing corporal punishment could easily be exposed, they had specifically used mental torment instead. Even Zhou Lang trembled as he spoke. He himself was already furious and could not imagine how enraged Mr. Huo must be. Filled with guilt, Mr. Huo watched his son playing with toy cars, while scene after scene from the past flashed through his mind. Ever since his son was a baby, he had raised Huo Ziao alone. He had heard countless whispers about his son's developmental delays, and had also heard his mother repeatedly insist that a single man simply could not raise a child well. He remembered the brief joy he had felt when Huo Junyao started speaking, and also the mounting pressure afterward, as well as the anger he had felt when his son resisted him. All of it was his fault. He walked over to the child and softly apologized. Huo Junyao immediately brightened, hugged his father, and told him it was okay, as long as he knew he was wrong. In that moment of resolve, Mr. Huo announced that from now on they would not hire any more teachers. He would personally teach the child himself. This decision made his son let out a silent scream of despair. Meanwhile, Nanqing found Huo Junyao quietly reading. She called him her precious darling, kissed his forehead, and praised him for being especially well-behaved. This boy, who was actually the real Huo Junyao, blushed from the gentle affection she showered on him. Holding his hand, she led him toward the bedroom and smilingly asked whether he wanted to bathe with Mommy. The boy instantly panicked and turned red all over, stammering out a refusal. One terrifying thought filled his mind. If he bathed, it would expose the fact that he was really a boy. Huo Junyao wriggled free from his mother's embrace and suddenly became shy. She laughed and teased him, saying he was growing up. The boy darted away at once, but she still called after him, reminding him that she had a very important surgery in 2 days and needed to rest well. He obediently agreed, but then his brother's words echoed in his mind. Mom is in poor health, so you absolutely must not disturb her. Half an hour passed, and the boy figured Mom had probably fallen asleep. He tiptoed to the door of her bedroom, gently pushed it open, and resolved not to wake her no matter what. Inside, she was sleeping peacefully. Seeing that, a wave of pure happiness surged through the boy's heart. He climbed onto the bed and lay down beside her, immersed in the wonderful feeling of finally having a mother. But this tender moment was shattered by the vibration of the phone in his pocket. It was a string of anxious messages from his brother, urging him to switch back quickly, even wailing that he did not love Dad anymore. This clearly meant that the twins' identity swap plan was now in full effect. At the same time, at the Huo residence, the real Huo Junyao was anxiously waiting for a reply, and the moment his father came in, he hurriedly hid the phone. His father, Huo Junyao, placed a textbook in front of him and said that since so much time had passed, they would start with something simple. Huo Junyao could only stare blankly at the textbook, looking utterly lost, like a portrait of who am I, where am I? He quickly made up a story, crying that he had grown up abroad and still could not recognize all these characters. But Huo Junyao clearly did not believe him and flipped back to content from half a year ago. Things that, in theory, his genius son should have known instantly. Yet Gu Ziao, disguised as Huo Junyao, only kept shaking her head, guilt written all over her face. In desperation, she suggested they study poetry instead, boasting that she could recite poems. His father agreed, and there was even a flicker of hope in his eyes as he asked the question. Gu Ziao immediately raised her hand excitedly, but that faint hope was soon utterly crushed. She mangled the famous line beyond recognition, even replacing heroic warrior with handsome guy. Even more absurdly, she refused to give up and started reciting another poem, only to derail halfway through into praising a handsome guy going to eat roast duck, and finally looked smugly pleased with herself and demanded that her father praise her. That completely crossed the line. Veins bulged at Huo Junyao's temples, and his face twisted with rage. Through gritted teeth, he shouted a name, Huo Junyao, the girl? In other words, Gu Ziao, whose identity had now been exposed, felt as though the father before her was a furious demon, and in terror she turned and ran, screaming that Daddy was going to kill his own daughter. Huo Junyao slumped down and lamented that the father-son relationship they had only just begun to improve had now completely fallen apart. After observing from the side, the assistant remarked that the young master seemed to have regressed, even predicting that he would finish dead last in the year-end assessment. But Huo Junyao waved his hand and decided not to force him anymore. He thought that although Huo Junyao schoolwork had worsened, he had also become more expressive, and psychological well-being was clearly more important. The assistant then changed the subject and wondered whether this change had anything to do with Miss Su, suggesting that Huo Junyao give her a chance. In return, he received only an ice-cold look so chilling that he froze on the spot. Huo Junyao's thoughts suddenly sharpened, and he began to wonder how she had known about the tutors in the first place. He ordered that she was not to go near Huo Junyao again, convinced that she was a cold-blooded woman. In another room, Gu Xiao smugly sent his brother a message, bragging that Dad had been so moved by his poetry that he no longer had to do homework. Her brother only reminded her not to forget their plan, and Gu Xiao promised she would definitely complete the mission. Then she ran to her father's side, hugged his leg, and praised him for being so handsome. Huo Junyao paused for a moment and replied that his son was handsome too, but the boy immediately corrected him, saying that he was pretty. That word choice left his father completely baffled. The more Huo Junyao thought about it, the more wrong it felt, and he immediately ordered the assistant to call the family doctor. The scene shifted to the movie theater, where Huo Xiao sent his mother a message saying that they had arrived. After going in, she held his hand and asked whether he wanted to take off his mask, but he insisted it was to keep from getting sick, so she indulgently agreed. This warm scene formed a sharp contrast with Gu Xiao's earlier memory of arguing with her father over unhealthy popcorn. Soon, Huo Junyao arrived with Gu Xiao as well, finally understanding why his son had insisted on coming here. It turned out to be a setup, also they could run into Mom. Everyone took their seats, but unfortunately the children sat between the adults, completely cutting off any chance for them to interact. Gu Xiao immediately panicked, thinking that if this happened, how were Mom and Dad supposed to fall in love? While he was absorbed in the movie, he suddenly asked Mom for popcorn. Half asleep, the mother drowsily reached out and fed a piece of popcorn to the child beside her, and that child just happened to be Gu Xiao. That single gesture instantly ignited an icy fury in the heart of her biological son, Huo Xiao. He glared at her fiercely, as if accusing her of feeding someone else's son while ignoring her own daughter. Huo Junyao was equally shocked, utterly unable to guess what game she was playing. As the drowsiness faded, the mother's gaze finally focused, and only then did she see clearly that the person sitting beside her was Huo Junyao. Her heart jumped in shock at once. She wondered whether he had already made her an enemy and had come here on purpose to test her. She quickly assessed the situation before her, and in the end, only one heavy thought remained in her mind. This was bad. The dim lighting of the theater did nothing to ease the tension. Mr. Huo appeared at Su Nanqing's side, his voice thick with sarcasm as he commented on their little coincidence. Leaning down slightly, he reminded her once again that he had warned her not to get too close. Clearly, his patience was nearly gone, and he bluntly accused her of deliberately arranging all these chance encounters. Su Nanqing scoffed and told the narcissistic man that he was far from her type. Her denial only seemed to fuel his arrogance further. Coldly, he told her to stop wasting energy trying to seduce him and to worry more about her critically ill aunt instead. His words hit a raw nerve, but she immediately shot back that her family affairs were none of his business. Their argument kept escalating until another moviegoer interrupted, mistakenly assuming they were a quarreling young couple and scolding them for frightening the child. The two of them instantly fell in an awkward silence. Little Gu Xiao trembled between them. In the end, Mr. Huo tossed out, "And I understand now," warned Su Nanqing to stay away from his child, then yanked the child up and stormed out of the theater, leaving Su Nanqing seething behind him. Outside, he sternly forbade Huo Xiao from having any further contact with that cold-blooded woman, a woman who would rather watch a movie than care for her dying aunt. Huo Xiao exploded on the spot, angrily shouting that Mom was the kindest person in the world and that she would definitely save great-aunt Grandma. Mr. Huo was stunned by the child's fierce defense and could not help wondering what kind of spell that woman had cast on his son. This quarrel completely shattered the fragile father-son bond that had only just begun to sprout, and Huo Xiao ran off crying. Mr. Huo, meanwhile, was pierced by a sharp and unfamiliar sense of regret. At the same time, Su Nanqing arrived at Yanjing City Hospital. The moment she entered the ward, yet another thick, inescapable family drama rushed at her. Her sister, Su Inning, immediately lashed out, calling her ignorant and uneducated for having found some unknown doctor to perform such an extremely difficult surgery with almost no chance of success. But the atmosphere quickly changed because her uncle revealed that the lead surgeon was no nobody at all, but the world-famous miracle Doctor Anthea. Su Nanqing merely explained calmly that she had only emailed the scan results to the other party. And to everyone's surprise, the other party had agreed. Seeing her family begin circling around her, Su Nanqing made an excuse and left, leaving behind a furious Su Inning glaring at her departing back, her original plans completely ruined. Not long after, a team of doctors arrived. Leading the group was Professor Liu. Su Enying immediately seized the opportunity and lied to the professor, claiming that she was the one who had contacted Dr. Anthea. That lie won her an extremely rare opportunity to enter the prep room and observe the surgery. In the prep room, dressed in surgical scrubs, Su Enying went up to the masked person she mistook for Anthea and shamelessly flattered them, hoping to use the chance to get into a postgraduate program. A man named Ong Sun watched coldly from the side, inwardly scoffing at her clumsy little performance, then directly called out the doctor's real name. Su Nanqing. Exposed on the spot, Su Enying stammered out an excuse, saying she had only borrowed her cousin's name because she was afraid the other party would not respond otherwise. But Su Nanqing backed her into a corner with one simple and fatal question. What was her email address? Su Enying instantly froze, and her lie collapsed in front of everyone. Ong Sun's gaze turned icy with contempt as he ordered the morally corrupt student to get out of his sight immediately. Once only she and the patient remained, Su Nanqing leaned close to her aunt and softly told her that she was Anthea and that everything would be fine. From the observation deck, Mr. Hua and Ong Sun watched the surgery begin. Once he noticed the patient on the operating table, his attention was completely drawn to the surgeon's focused expression and flawless skill as she calmly carried out the critical operation. When the surgery ended smoothly, a small commotion happened to provide perfect cover, and Su Nanqing seized the chance to quietly slip out of the operating room. But Mr. Ho was not so easily fooled. He immediately ordered the entire surgical floor sealed off, determined to uncover the true identity of this genius doctor. In the empty hallway, Su Nanqing let out a breath of relief, thinking she had escaped, only for a strong hand to suddenly clamp down on her wrist the next second. It was Mr. Hua. An unreadable light flickered in his eyes as he praised Dr. Anthea for pulling off such a clever escape. He asked whether she was willing to remove her mask, but before she could answer, he reached up and tore it off himself. The face revealed beneath, it was Su Nanqing's. She lifted her eyes to him, a faintly provocative smile at the corner of her lips, and returned his own words to him verbatim, saying lightly, "What a coincidence. I never expected to see you here." In that instant, his entire world was overturned. He finally realized that the woman he despised and the surgeon he admired were actually the same person. Nanqing calmly admitted to the man in surgical scrubs that sneaking into the operating room had indeed been wrong, but she was willing to take full responsibility, explaining that she had acted only as a desperate family member with nowhere else to turn. The doctor revealed his identity. He was Huo Junyao. Only then did he understand that she had not ignored her aunt after all. So he proposed a deal. If she agreed to one condition, he would persuade the hospital not to pursue the matter any further. He explained that ever since the incident at the movie theater, his son Huo Junyao had been emotionally shattered and kept crying for his mother. So he wanted her to return to the hotel and spend 2 hours playing with the child. Nanqing was utterly speechless inside, wondering whether this man had already gone insane. Even though she had warned him again and again to stay away from her, she still rejected the proposal on the spot, saying bluntly that she was not a nanny, had no feelings for him whatsoever, and was far too exhausted to comfort a child. If he wanted anything, he could have his lawyer contact hers. After she left, Huo Junyao's subordinate reported that they had failed to stop the mysterious Anthea. A colleague beside him looked baffled, unable to understand how Anthea could have vanished when they had clearly guarded the exits. Huo Junyao calmly laid out 3 possibilities. Either the intelligence was wrong, or Anthea was an expert at escape, or, the most unsettling possibility of all, Nanqing was Anthea. To his colleague, the idea sounded absurd. The man pointed out that her official records clearly stated that she had barely received any education. But Huo Junyao connected all the clues. According to the information they had, Anthea had appeared because of the email Nanqing sent, which also explained why she had been so confident the whole time. After saying what he needed to say about her aunt's surgery, he turned and left, leaving his partner alone to process the shocking suspicion. At the same time, the young twins Hu Xiao and Gu Xiao had already switched identities. Gu Xiao complained that his strict father would not let him play video games at all. They were worried about their father's hostility toward their mother. So they discussed using a tougher method if their current plan did not work. After returning to the hotel, Huo Junyao awkwardly took out a Barbie doll and handed it to his son, who was actually Gu Xiao, disguised as Huo Xiao, in an attempt to cheer him up. He even crouched down and suggested they comb the Barbie's hair together, then asked Huo Junyao whether he knew how to braid it. The boy stared at him expressionlessly. The next second, he suddenly exploded and flat-out called his dad an idiot. Huo Junyao was completely stunned, utterly unable to figure out how his son's personality could have changed so drastically. Just a moment ago, he had wanted the doll, and now he looked disgusted by it, which only deepened his suspicion that woman had to be the key to the problem. Meanwhile, the real Huo Junyao was downstairs playing video games when he suddenly heard Zhou Lang muttering that the boss was in a terrible mood because they had not found Dr. Anthea. Huo Junyao froze at once and immediately realized that his father was looking for his mother. Just then, Huo Junyao appeared in the doorway. He sharply demanded to know why Huo Junyao was there. Caught off guard, Huo Junyao blurted out that her brother had told her they could not acknowledge their mother before their father and mother fell in love, or would trigger a custody battle. Huo Junyao ignored the ridiculous explanation completely, grabbed Huo Junyao, and prepared to discipline her, scaring her so badly that she immediately cried out for her mother to save her. Hearing the commotion, a maid hurried to wake Nanqing, shouting that Mr. Hua had taken Huo Junyao away. As she was carried all the way upstairs, Huo Junyao panicked, realizing there was no time to send her brother a message. Their secret was about to be exposed. Huo Junyao set him down and sternly ordered him never to leave the penthouse floor again. At that moment, memories of his own childhood kidnapping came flooding back. That deeply buried trauma was exactly why he was so harsh in disciplining his child. The moment he thought about what terrible things might happen to his son, he became so afraid he could barely move. Seeing that his father was genuinely frightened, the boy promised he would never do it again, then hugged him tightly and comforted him, telling him not to be afraid. He even tested the waters by saying that if he liked Miss Sue, he could let her come upstairs to keep him company. Just minutes earlier, Zhou Lang had personally seen the boss drag away the crying child. But right after that, he saw another identical child sitting calmly at the desk as if nothing had happened. The second child rubbed his eyes and muttered that his awful dad would not let him go find his mommy. Zhou Lang was completely dumbfounded, and when Huo Junyao came back 20 seconds later carrying the first child, his shock turned directly into utter stupefaction. When he saw both children standing in the same room, the unbelievable truth finally crashed down on him. Huo Junyao ran downstairs at once and threw herself in her mother's arms. Nanqing, flustered and frightened, had only just stumbled downstairs herself. She hugged him tightly and hurriedly asked whether Huo Junyao had hurt him. But the next second, her eyes narrowed warily because she noticed that he was still wearing pajamas. Realizing she had grown suspicious, the boy quickly changed the subject, asking whether she wanted to go to sleep, then turned and ran off to play video games. The next day, a maid wanted to put Huo Junyao into a pink ruffled dress so she could be taken to meet the elders, but Huo Junyao, who was substituting for his younger sister, absolutely refused to wear it. He hid behind his mother, and Nanqing also found it strange because her daughter usually loved dressing up like a little princess. Afraid that continuing like this would only arouse even more suspicion, Huo Junyao had no choice but to reluctantly agree to put on the dress. He stood there with a humiliated expression, dressed in a pink lace dress, and immediately seized the chance to call his brother. On the other end, Huo Junyao was practically in tears, afraid that if their uncle saw the two of them, he would expose their secret. Huo Junyao, always calm, dismissed the concern, directly describing the man as a single-celled organism who could never figure something like that out. Just as he was speaking, their mother called for him to set out, so he hung up. When they arrived at the hospital, the family gathered around Huo Junyao and praised how cute he was. Only the resentful cousin kept stirring up trouble, blaming Nanqing for costing her the award for top graduate. She sneered at everyone, saying they were actually feeling grateful towards someone who had done nothing more than send an email and leave. The pleasantries were quickly interrupted when one elder coldly remarked that although the child was cute, her father was surely just some street thug. Huo Junyao shot back on the spot that his daddy was not a thug. The cousin gave a cold laugh and added viciously that perhaps he was just some despicable beggar, since back then no decent man would ever have wanted their mother. Nanqing's gaze turned ice cold at once, and anger swept through her whole body. She seized the cousin's arm and asked in a dangerously low voice whether the beating she got last time had not been enough. The conflict erupted instantly. Nanqing's father accused her of being arrogant, overbearing, and having no sense of propriety. Her grandmother also warned her absolutely not to lay a hand on the child. Then the old woman sighed with some regret and said that if Nanqing's missing son Huo Junyao were still alive, who knew what he would look like by now? Those words immediately put Nanqing on high alert. Her suspicion was quickly confirmed. Her father, Su Hongrui, took out a company transfer agreement and waved it in front of her, his tone full of smugness and threat as he mocked her. In this world, only he knew where her son was. If she still wanted that information, she had a sign. Driven into a corner, Nanqing lowered her head and looked at her daughter Gu Ziao, saying that as long as she could find her older brother, any price would be worth paying, even losing every last cent of her fortune. Those words deeply stabbed the little girl's heart. Just as Nanqing's hand hovered over the document and the pen tip was about to fall, Gu Ziao suddenly rushed forward, screamed for her not to sign, and knocked the papers to the floor. The scene instantly descended into chaos, and her older sister lunged at the child as well. Declaring that she would hit her, she raised her hand, but Nanqing moved even faster and clamped down on the woman's wrist like an iron vice. The family was still shouting that it was only a contract and they could just print another copy, but Nanqing had already reached the limit of her patience. She directly scolded the whole family for being mentally abnormal, then picked up Huo Junyao and resolved to take him away from this toxic environment. She instructed grandmother to take the others back to the Su family home first, while she herself would take Huo Junyao to the hotel. But after they left, grandmother secretly told another daughter to keep a close watch on them. In the car, Nanqing was deep in thought about what to do next, while Gu Ziao quietly picked up a phone and sent an anonymous email. A moment later, a notification popped up on Nanqing's tablet, an email from an unknown sender claiming to know where her son was. She stared at the email, her pupils widening slightly as hope and suspicion surged together inside her. She immediately tried to trace the sender, but a powerful anti-tracking program launched across the screen at once. A vicious skull icon flashed up, and then the signal abruptly cut off. This attempt at tracing nearly wrecked her phone, giving her a jolt of alarm. She could not help wondering what kind of person could be powerful enough to deploy firewall software written by the legendary international hacker Y. This brand new mysterious lead changed everything completely. After returning to the hotel, she coldly informed her older sister, who had been waiting for a long time, that she would not sign that contract. Her sister, furious, grabbed her arm and demanded to know whether she no longer wanted to find her son. But Nanqing merely replied calmly that she was not stupid enough to believe their father would not deceive her with false information. She threw their condition right back at them and told them that if they wanted the company so badly, they should find her son first. Just then, a commotion suddenly broke out in the lobby. A man had collapsed unconscious on the spot. Out of instinct, Nanqing first told Gu Ziao to go upstairs, explaining that she needed to check the emergency situation over there. Meanwhile, the domineering President Hua was considering the recent probe Hacker Q had made against his firewall when his son Huo Junyao suddenly burst in, proudly showing off the doll he had dressed up. Faced with his father's perfunctory praise, the boy pouted unhappily, leaving his flustered father with no choice but to retreat to the study. In the study, an assistant handed over an investigation report on Su Nanqing. It mentioned the 5 years she had mysteriously disappeared after being expelled from her family, and the final conclusion was that she was almost certainly not the legendary Doctor Anthea. Their conversation was interrupted by a phone call reporting a medical emergency in the lobby. One guest had already stopped breathing. President Hua immediately ordered his assistant to go check on it. He walked out of the study, only to find the living room completely empty except for a doll tossed on the floor. The maid told him that young Master Huo had gone next door. In the next room, a flamboyantly dressed man kept stuffing all kinds of designer clothes into Huo Junyao's arms. The boy rummaged through the pile of gifts, and his gaze suddenly landed on a beautiful dress. He held up the dress, and pure, radiant joy instantly bloomed across his face. Excitedly, he said he wanted to try it on, leaving his uncle too stunned to say a single word.